Hello and welcome back to Chapter 22, Deep Earth. It has been a very exciting last couple days. So I have a surprise at the end. So if you have time, stick around afterwards. We'll have a little show and tell. But in the meantime, let us go ahead and dive in. Okay, so last time, wrong chapter. So last time we had hedges, and we were meeting the lagarel, and we were rescuing Bermuda, and tearing down the hedges and doing all that lovely stuff. As a result, they ended up getting the mark of the lagarel. And so, since this picks up right from where the other chapter left off, I'll read just a couple sentences. Seafool reached forward and placed the seed gently against my skin at the top of my chest. It sank into my skin, into my magic, and suddenly Penny was there, eyes blazing in fury, Athena battle outfit on. Intruder, she cried, and started to attack. Chapter 22, Deep Earth. Stop, I commanded in panic. She stopped, but she didn't put her guard down or relax in any way. This is the mark of the lagarel, I told her quickly. There are trees like tea, only in real life and much bigger. This is a special honor from them, so please don't destroy it. I quickly slipped into image mode and caught her up to date on everything that had happened. Apparently she'd powered down to a lower awareness to conserve magic, and it had been a nasty shock when she felt this new magic in my system. She calmed down quickly, and then we both watched it for a moment. It's not doing much, she said thoughtfully as we stared at it. I think maybe we're supposed to do something to wake it up, I suggested. The seed was just sitting there, suspended in my aura. My matrix worked around it, but my magic really wasn't interacting with it. Try giving it some capsules, Penny suggested. After all, you just promised to nourish it with your magic. It's worth a shot, I said. I broke down a few nodes of the matrix into its capsule form and then pushed them towards the seed. They bumped up against the surface and just sat there. I felt like we were on the right track, but nothing was happening. I zoomed in for a closer look and saw what I expected to see. My soul-filled, highly saturated emerald green and sapphire blue capsules were sitting right next to its leafy green surface, and neither side was changing. Both surfaces were solid, and both sides were saturated with color. There's something different on this side, Penny said, and I zoomed over to check it out. Now the seed was inside me. It was shaped like a sphere. I liked that, as my whole matrix was based on spheres. Because of that, I just figured it was perfectly round, but it wasn't. One part of it had dimples, sort of like the top of a peach. In the middle of the dimple was a hole. Maybe my magic was supposed to go in there? I called the capsules over to me and fed them into the new opening. There was a bit of a ripple that flashed over the surface of the seed. Then it stopped. I was supposed to nourish this thing, so it probably wanted more. I fed it more capsules, which created more ripples. Nothing really changed though, so I just kept on feeding it. It wasn't long before I got tired of feeding it a few capsules at a time, so I broke down a bunch of my magic and just started shoveling it in. That did the trick. A bump rose on the surface. Then the bump extended, forming an arm. No, it formed a root. Duh, it was a seed. Seeds need water so they could form roots and start retrieving their own nutrients, of course. I was on the right track because the new root consisted of all three colors, mine and the seed's leafy green. I kept feeding it magic until the root grew enough to reach the matrix. It stopped at that point and two more bumps formed. I continued to feed it magic until those roots grew enough to reach the matrix as well. At that point, I stepped back and watched it for a moment. The colors in the roots were slowly shifting, so something was going on. Hopefully it had enough of a connection at this point, and it could grow from here. I don't really feel any different, I told Penny. Can you sense anything? I can feel it is quite complex, she said. I think there's a lot hidden inside, but it's just going to have to grow and become more comfortable before you find out what that is. She paused thoughtfully. In some ways, I don't think this is the ideal environment for the mark. Really? I felt that way too, but I wasn't sure why. Your magic is very organized and has a strong identity. This seed is very compact and also has a strong identity. The two identities aren't fighting, but they're not exactly merging together either. I looked at the scene and Penny had nailed it on the head. The seed was clearly in its own space. The matrix had its own space, and the only thing that connected the three of them was the roots. That didn't seem like much for something that was going to grow and provide me with all the seed's benefits. I'd have to keep working on it, but I could do that later. Hopefully it wouldn't be long before both magics snuggled up together and watched Netflix like besties. Right now, though, they were eyeing each other like two cats, trying to figure out the pecking order. With a sigh, I zoomed back out to the real world again, only to find everybody staring at me. Have you connected with the mark? Kopak inquired anxiously. Yes, I nodded. I gave it some magic and it has grown 3 roots. That is a good sign, Kopak said encouragingly. He seemed a bit anxious, though. I certainly wasn't having the overwhelming connection that Sandy had experienced. Can you hear us now? Can you talk to Seaful? They all stared at me intently like they were trying to telepathically beam thoughts into my head. Not yet, I shook my head. They rustled for a moment and stopped staring at me so intently. Instead, they now seemed a bit disappointed. I wanted to have the same marvelous connection and feeling of wonder that Sandy had experienced, so I was a bit disappointed too. Having a powerful soul wasn't always an advantage. Seaful feels sure it just needs a season, Kopak said. Continue to give it your time and attention, and you will grow together. Seaful rustled a bit. Sometimes it's like meeting a new mouse. Sometimes the mouse comes up right away, nestles in your roots, and starts a family. Sometimes it takes a season before the mouse comes in where it's safe and warm. In both cases, the connection is honest and fulfilling. The example was a little unusual, but I got the idea. I also realized I'd been thinking of the seed like it was a thing, like it was some sort of magic wand for me to use, or a new fancy remote for the TV. If I thought of it like the seed was alive in some way, then that changed everything. If it was a little mouse, I'd want to give it a home, and a blanket to snuggle up in, and some food for snacks. I'd want to make sure my mouse was happy, and I'd check in on it to see if it was sleeping or wanted to play. Please thank Seaful for his kind words, I told Kopak. He has given me a new perspective to work with. I kind of wanted to zoom in and check on my seed again, but I was still the center of attention and I didn't want to hold everything up. Seaful promised to restore you to full power. Hi everybody, here is Bermuda. Hey! Seaful promised to restore you to full power, Kopak continued, and now you have the mark of the lagarel. He can safely share his magic without blowing you up. Well, that was good to know. I didn't really want to blow up either. I liked my intestines right where they were. Thank you very much. Seaful rustled. Your instructions are to breathe in through your new mark. Since you are so young and inexperienced, Seaful will only give you 1 drop at a time. Absorb what you can. If it becomes too much, just fall over. Working with tree people was certainly fun and different. I got analogies using mice, and falling over meant stop. I'm sure they thought working with humans was just as entertaining. I nodded to show I understood, and Seaful leaned forward and tapped the top of my chest where he'd placed the mark. A drop of incredibly dense mana entered my system and was immediately sucked in by the mark. I zoomed in, but not as far this time. Instead of thinking of it as a thing, like a sphere to be examined, I thought of it as a little ball of life. It was a tree mouse looking for a home. The image didn't fit exactly, but it was certainly more personal than what I've been using. I should just think of it as a seed, Plants are alive after all, and I do appreciate them, especially trees. But as a city boy, a seed just didn't inspire me. For now, I just needed a mental image that would let me pull in Cecil's magic into my system. Breathing seemed like a good idea, and it was something Cecil had suggested. I imagined the mark as some sort of mask, and I was sucking in air from the outside. That just made it a thing again, and it didn't work. Maybe go with water? Like the mark was a water filtration device and I was drinking out of it? What popped into my head was an octopus. The roots were its arms and I was trying to suck on it like I wanted milk from a cow. That was just so wrong on so many levels. Needless to say, that didn't work, and I sent mental apologies to Octa and her tangle. Ugh, scrub that from my brain. Okay, how about a nuclear power plant? Nope. A sponge and I was squeezing out the water? Nope. Cadbury chocolate Easter egg? Don't ask. Nope. This was frustrating. My sight and my imagination usually meant I was crazy good at this sort of stuff. The only time I'd been this stumped was when I'd spent days trying to get a charm to work. It just wouldn't happen. No, don't go down that road, my analytical side spoke up. Comparing the mark to something you felt will just lead to frustration. I agree, I said, but how the hell do I relate to it? There has to be a way to unlock it. Maybe start with what it seems like to you, and then work towards something from there, he said in his dry British voice. Start with your truth, however weird or strange it may seem. What was my truth? It was a ball of magic. That's how I felt about it. No, it was more than that. It reminded me of the cobalt slug. It reminded me of a piece of dense magic that had invaded my aura and attempted to destroy me. That was my truth. It wasn't the mark's fault. It had done nothing wrong, and normally I probably would have warmed up to it right away. It was just bad timing. My defenses were up. Heck, even Penny's defenses were up. It was just the new magic had landed in a war zone. Yet it needed a safe space, a space to grow, a space to wake up. That tickled a thought, a place to wake up. It was sleeping. It was sleeping because it didn't have enough of my magic yet. That was just like Penny. When she didn't have enough of my magic, she slept. Was the mark like Penny? Was it just a tiny ball of magic that with enough attention and care would wake up and become aware like Penny and Eggy? I could understand that. I could get behind that. I was used to being a source and making sure that Penny and Eggy were happy. In turn, I was used to them helping me. That's what this mark was, or at least what it could be. Sure, it was a different color, but Eggy had been a different color when he'd switched to me. I just needed to treat the mark of the lagarel like I did Penny when she was sleeping. I just needed to exchange magic with it. No, I needed to exchange magic with him. Until further notice, his name was Mark, and he was my little sleeping beauty. I felt so happy. I was back in familiar territory again. I knew how to wake up sleeping charms. I just pulled magic into them Whoops, I got that wrong. I just pushed magic into them and pulled magic out of them again. And I kept doing that until they reached enough saturation of colors to wake up. I'd done this for hours on end with Penny when she'd gotten low, and I'd done it with Eggy. I'd even taken my egg to bed and done it in my sleep. Before I thought about it too much and psyched myself out, I just started the process with Mark. I pushed the magic in and then pulled it out. The flow felt constricted as it was all going through 3 tiny roots, but I just let that go. That wasn't anything I needed to worry about. More roots would grow. For now, I just needed to know I could do it, that it was easy to do it. I pushed magic in, then I pulled it out. Then I pushed magic in, then I pulled it out. It felt like waves on the beach. It felt like breathing. It was natural, it was easy, and I lost myself for a while in the zen of the rhythm. Somewhere in here, more roots grew and flexed, and the flow became so much easier. Then it became more than just communing with Mark. I felt the drop of magic the Seafool had given, and I started processing it through the roots into my system. Mark was doing half the work for me, and that it was taking all the intense leafy green magic and converting it into something I could use. By the time it got through the roots, it wasn't true neutral magic, but it was pretty close. It was certainly at a density and color that I could work with. All too soon it was gone, and I stopped pulling extra magic from Mark as I didn't want him to get too low and unravel. I opened my eyes and found everyone staring at me again. I'm very happy to tell you that Mark and I have reached a new level in our relationship, I announced. That is most welcome to hear, Kopok said happily. I still couldn't understand the lagarel yet, as he rustled and passed on the news, but I was confident that one day I would. I've also processed the magic the Seafool gave me, and I'm ready for more, I told him. That seemed to produce a lot of rustling, but Seafool leaned forward and gave me another drop. This time I didn't even need to close my eyes and concentrate, as I'd never stopped pushing and pulling magic. I tapped into the new drop and adjusted the ratio of pulling to pushing. Soon it was gone too. Okay, I'm ready for more, I told Kopok politely. Are you sure? He asked in concern. Seafool's magic is very potent, and I was serious about you exploding. Too much high-density magic in your system could destroy you, or at least set your growth back several years. I double-checked my matrix. It was doing fine. I knew what too much magic felt like, thanks to Penny flooding my system in the fight with Big Ugly, and I was nowhere near that level yet. Yes, I'm good, thank you, I replied. Are you really sure? Kopok persisted. It might be that the magic is just sitting in the mark and hasn't been absorbed yet. There's a lot of rustling going on. I checked while they chatted. Nope, I was sure I'd taken all the extra magic out of Mark and absorbed it. I'm sure, I said confidently. I'm ready for more. Mark has grown a bit since we started this process, so let's try 2 drops this time. Seafool regarded me for a long moment. Then he leaned forward and gave me 2 drops. Because Mark had grown, absorbing 2 drops took a bit longer, but not by much. Penny, I called, and she was there. I quickly caught her up on what was happening, and she seemed excited to have a new baby brother. Or at least that's the way I translated it. She actually sent me an image of a big rock and a tiny pebble sitting close to each other. I figured that was close enough. I'm sure Seafool won't want to put out enough magic to fill you up too, I said, but I don't think getting you out of the sleepy zone would hurt. He said he would fill me up with magic, so take what you need to feel normal, then I'll fill up with Seafool's magic from there. I was pushing the boundaries of what Seafool had promised, but there was a limit to how much neutral magic I could absorb at any one time. In the end, it all worked out well. Seafool was surprised at just how much I could hold, but the amount he gave me was still less than he'd given Sandy, and he didn't seem to mind. Penny was out of the sleepy zone, and I was pleasantly stuffed with power. It wasn't enough for me to go crazy and massively expand my gem cell shield, but for now, I had enough to defend myself if I needed to. This had turned out to be a very exciting evening. I now had a mark, I had a whole new group of friends, and I was topped up on magic. Overall, very nice. I was disappointed that I hadn't found a force rune, but we had spent a lot of time with the lagarel, and I figured everyone would want to head back to the house now. Sandy probably wanted to spend a bit of time talking with John, and I still had a bunch of centaurs to heal when I got back to the room. With my mind already set on returning, I looked over to Sandy to see how she was doing. That's why I was so shocked when eyes glowing with fire, she looked back at me. Sandy, I said quickly. Sandy, are you okay? She stared into space, lost in thought. Sandy, I yelled, and everyone turned to look at her. That's when her hair caught fire. Then the rest of her burst into flames. Holy crap! Sandy, I yelled again, just as all the grass around her started burning. The heat she was putting off was intense. If she didn't stop now, she's going to burn the whole field up and us along with it. She blinked, looked around calmly, then snapped her fingers, and all the flames in the grass snuffed out. It was an impressive display of power. The flames didn't die out, they just simply disappeared and the grass stopped burning. She was still burning though, and it was still putting out a crazy amount of heat. She looked at us and started to say something, but then the grass started burning again. "This is tedious," Sandy stated, but her voice didn't sound like her at all. Instead, she sounded like James Earl Jones from The Lion King. Suddenly, a thick column of stone grew out of the ground under her and lifted her 20 feet into the air. She snapped her fingers again, and again the flames in the grass snuffed out. She watched them for a moment, but since she was far removed from them, they didn't relight. She nodded serenely, then she looked at Seafull and gestured. A huge column of rock, wide enough to encompass Seafull and all his roots, burst out of the ground and lifted him into the air. Then she gestured at me, and suddenly I was airborne too. It looked awe-inspiring when Sandy had done it, but when I was actually experiencing getting stone thrust into the sky, it was scary as hell. There were no handrails, no seat belts, no safety features on this ride at all. My stone column was about 3 foot wide, so it wasn't like it was a narrow ledge, but still, 20 feet in the air is really high up. I hadn't thought I was scared of heights until that moment. Now I wasn't so sure. I looked down and the centaurs and the lagarel seemed so far below me. I felt a little dizzy, so I quickly sat down. I probably wouldn't die if I fell, but I've had all the broken bones I ever wanted. I'd rather stay in one piece, thank you very much. I looked back over at Sandy and she seemed fine, other than the fact that she was on fire and talking like James Earl Jones. Her clothes had burned off her, but her hair and skin seemed healthy. In fact, with the flame licking around her figure, she looked almost exactly like the woman in her glass sculpture. "Be not afraid," she intoned, and her voice was loud and rolled across the plain. "I am the deep earth. I have claimed my ambassador, and my ambassador has claimed me." That sounded serious and awesome. Well, hopefully it was awesome. Hopefully Sandy wasn't possessed by a powerful entity that never let her go, or pulled her into a volcano, or changed her into some sort of fire queen that could never wear clothes or eat real food again, or pulled her into a volcano so he could have sex with her. "How many bad sci-fi movies have you seen?" my analytical side said. "Stop being a drama queen and just go with the flow. I'm sure she'll be fine." Having made her announcement, Sandy started moving. A wall of stone grew out of the ground, providing a wide path for her to walk on, and she was headed right for Seafull. His hair branches were quivering like crazy, and he started making the hooting cries of his people. At first, I thought he might be scared of Sandy, but he wasn't trying to run away or anything. Seafull was an old tree with a lot of power. I'm sure he could just fly away or slide down the column if he really wanted to escape. Her wall of rock reached his column and merged with it. Sandy stepped in front of him, and although she was much smaller physically, she seemed so much bigger for some reason. They stared at each other for a long time, having their own private conversation. I'm not sure how long this went on for. It was long enough for me to get restless and my butt to start feeling sore. Stone is not the most comfortable thing to sit on. Finally, Seafull did a hair bow, and Sandy spoke in her Mufasa voice. "Seafull Silverleaf, head of House Silverleaf, ambassador of the lagarel, champion of the forest, pillar of realm Silverleaf, and friend to many, has accepted the mark of the deep earth. This pleases me, it pleases him." Sandy held out her hand and started forming something that looked like a drop of lava. Magic roared into it, and it started glowing like a small sun. "Fear not, for he is being baptized by fire and become renewed." She touched the drop of lava to the surface of Seafull, and he went up like a torch. I'd never seen something so big catch fire so fast. I wanted to be happy for the guy, but he started doing something that could only be called as screaming. He was doing his hooting cry again, but now it sounded really high-pitched and sounded frantic. His arms shook, his roots started writhing around like snakes, his little hair started thrashing like he was being electrocuted. I freaked out, and I think everyone else freaked out too. His fellow lagarel rustled and hooted, but there wasn't anything they could do. CL and NL started prancing in agitation, but again, there was nothing they could do either. There wasn't anything I could do, and this was just going to have to run its course. Fortunately, it didn't continue for long before the tone of CL's hoots changed. They became less, "Oh fuck, I'm burning up," and more, "Oh wow, this feels trippy." His hair stopped thrashing around and started waving like they were underwater. Finally, he stood up tall and calm, and the flame gradually died out. He gave a deep, long hair bow to Sandy, who bowed back. It was clear to me from that exchange that CL was now okay. It was also clear he was more important, and the deep earth vastly outranked the head of the lagarel. The deep earth then turned towards me, and another wall of stone started growing towards my column. I guess I was next. I felt the weight of its regard before it even got close. It was taking my measure and leaving itself open to my scrutiny in return. If I'd have felt the deep earth before meeting Mother Creation, Father Alrune, I would have been quaking in fear. I'd already had my mind blown twice though, so I was getting used to the feeling. The deep earth was massive. Actually, it was beyond massive. Massive was being in downtown Chicago and looking up at all the skyscrapers. Massive was looking up at a mountain and realizing just how small you are. Massive was being out in the ocean with no land in sight and really realizing just how much water there was in the world. The deep earth was beyond all that. All the water in all the oceans wasn't even 1% of the weight of the earth. As for life, there was so many more times more life underground than there was on the surface. It wasn't human life, but it was still life. I wanted to look deeper, but I was afraid of getting my mind blown again. I still felt a bit spacey when I thought about my time with Mother Creation and Father Alrune. Thank goodness Bermuda had been there to put me back together again. As if he heard me thinking about him, Bermuda shifted around in his backpack and looked out over my shoulder. Then he licked my ear as if to say, "We got this." That snapped me out of my thoughts about the deep earth, and I realized where this was headed. I was going to catch on fire. I should have been more concerned about how I was going to feel, but instead I thought about how all of Sandy's clothes had burned up. I couldn't let that happen to Bermuda's backpack. That was his safe space in the middle of this whole event. I quickly shrugged out of the backpack and then lifted Bermuda out of it. He didn't want to leave. And he gave me a hurt look as I kicked the now empty backpack over the side. It seemed like it took a long time before it hit the ground. Sandy was getting closer as I realized I probably wanted to save the rest of my clothes too. Especially my shoes. It always seems like I ended up naked in any supernatural encounters. Might as well keep with tradition. At least my clothes would be available later. Having the minimum of shoes and underwear still intact would be a nice bonus. I quickly stripped down naked and threw all my clothes over the side. Now it was just me and Bermuda, and he wanted me to pick him up. I held him to my chest as he settled into my arms and gave the deep earth a flat stare. I don't know if it was just bravery of the young or if it was because he was my guardian, but nobody intimidated Bermuda. "Greetings, young one." The deep earth spoke in sentence fragments and images, just like the Alrune. In this case, it seemed very amused that it was going to be giving its mark to someone as young as I was. It was used to molten rock that lasted for millions of years. Us surface dwellers were bags of water that formed and then broke apart so quickly. If we weren't so entertaining, it wouldn't bother noticing us at all. Do what? Humans were entertaining? I got the sense that it liked to sit back and watch its favorite show, stupid human tricks. I wasn't sure how to take that. "Before we begin, I would like to make sure Sandy's okay," I said politely. There wasn't really anything I could do to a being of this magnitude, but I really wanted to make sure her mind wasn't getting fried in there. "My ambassador." It said it like, duh, of course I would take care of my ambassador, silly human. It sent images of places that were totally foreign to me, and its point was that reaching up to the surface world took lots of power and attention. It wanted a focus, someone on the surface to filter what was going on and relay it back in a way that was easy to understand. It was exceptionally rare that any surface dweller met the criteria for this focus. Sandy, however, had called upon the earth when she had sworn to bind her magic with John's. That had caught the deep earth's attention, and it had been watching them ever since. John was rock, and on his own he wasn't a strong enough anchor for a focus. Sandy on her own was fire, also not strong enough for a focus. But when they came together, they made molten rock, and that was perfect for what the deep earth needed. Sandy, however, hadn't really clued into the earth, at least not until tonight. Tonight she had listened to the glass and heard it speak. That was the trigger the deep earth had been looking for. It had also been wanting to connect with Seafool for some reason, so this was the perfect day for the deep earth to form a union with Sandy and John. This meant it wasn't just Sandy getting her flame on and getting all possessed. It was happening right now to John, too. I bet that was making for an exciting evening in Louisville. I'm glad that Sandy and John are safe," I continued. "I'm guessing that you are here to give me the mark. Is this something from the All Rune or creation?" "Mark. Bargain." I saw an image of Sandy and John's wedding again, except it was from an outside perspective. I was standing with John, Annabeth was standing with Sandy, and Tyler was officiating the ceremony. Then it sent me images showing Sandy had bargained for our marks. She'd agreed to become an ambassador of the deep earth if it would give those of us at the ceremony its mark. She told it that without us doing our part in the ceremony, her and John would not be the perfect match for the deep earth. Since we helped it, it could help us. Oh, so I wasn't anything special to the deep earth at all. I'd have thought for sure it was one of my two cosmic connections had pulled some strings for this. Instead, it was Sandy being the caring person she always was and watching out for her house. Well, that was just freaking awesome. It also meant that Annabeth and Tyler were going to be getting the mark too. Yay-haw. Creation? Allrune? My question had sparked its interest, though, and for the first time, it really looked at me. The weight of its attention was intense. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was standing at the open door to a blast furnace. Its query demanded answers, so I quickly sent back my images and memories of Mother Creation and Father Allrune. I figured if either of them didn't want me to share this, then they could easily stop me like they had before. The deep earth knew them both and knew them both well. It felt a sense of great affection for creation. She was practical, supportive, and very down to earth. Pun intended. It also had a deep respect for the Allrune, but it didn't really understand him. The deep earth had a massive consciousness, as many perspectives as it needed, and an intellect founded on trillions of microscopic life forms, but it still didn't understand the Allrune. If the two of them were interested in me, then that must mean I wasn't a normal surface life form, and now it wanted to know why. "Greetings, Guardian." It spoke to Bermuda, and Bermuda blinked back. They talked for a moment, but I wasn't included in that conversation. "Greetings, Awakened One." This time it was talking to Penny. She just about melted on my finger as she totally fangirled out. She was made of copper and zinc, and this was the consciousness of all metal and ore in the world. The deep earth was her god, her Chris Helmsworth crush, and her Elvis all rolled into one. I had a feeling I was going to be hearing about the day she met the deep earth for a long time to come. They buzzed for a moment in stone speak, but again I wasn't part of that conversation. The deep earth searched my connections and found Eggie. We were in totally different places, but that wasn't a problem for a being of its power. It buzzed at Eggie, and I could feel Eggie freaking out. One moment he was sitting and having a nice think on his glass stand by the window. The next, he was speaking with a godlike entity of the deep earth. If he were human, he would have had a heart attack. Since he was a round piece of metal, he just rolled with it. Interesting. Source mark. The deep earth's attention was back on me again. He agreed with the cosmic entities. I was young, but I was interesting. The deep earth especially liked that I was a source for not one, but two metal creations. It was disappointed that I was so weak at regular magic and had no fire or stone affinity to speak of. But the fact that I was bonded so well with two charms meant that I had potential. Because of that, it was adding a little something extra to my mark. I would have all the powers of a regular mark, but it also allowed me to bond even better with metal or stone awakened charms. I couldn't imagine getting closer with Penny and Eggie. We already had great communication and an easy transfer of magic. Maybe there was something I was missing about this though, and it really could kick everything up to another level. It certainly wouldn't hurt to try. Have you given the mark to Annabeth or Tyler yet? I asked. I got back a mental no. It was still working on things with John. Be sure and give both of them your full attention too, I suggested. Annabeth can hear magic and Tyler can heal emotions. Both of them are very rare with our species. I got back a mental affirmation, and then its attention lessened to a more normal level. Thank goodness, that much attention was a lot to handle. I'd added in the plug for Annabeth and Tyler with the hope that the deep earth would become interested in them also. If so, they might get a special mark too. The deep earth had still left itself wide open, so I decided to just ask questions while I could. After all, it's not every day you get to talk to a freaking planet. It had been around for millions of years, at least, and it surely had knowledge and insight that I couldn't find anywhere else. What can I do with this mark, and how is it different from other marks? I asked. Primary mark, it replied, and my brain almost exploded. There were thousands of marks in the world, maybe hundreds of thousands. Everything had a mark, and in turn, it was subject to greater marks. So a species of ant had a mark, which was a lesser version of the mark that covered all ants, which was a lesser version of the mark that covered all insects, which was itself a lesser version of something else. The amazing thing was, at the top of the food chain, only one step away from everything, was deep earth. I was getting the top of the top mark. Only the mark of everything was bigger, and that was claimed by the Allrune. Having a mark meant that you and the source of the mark had a connection, that you had something in common, and the mark allowed both parties to find each other, communicate with each other, and bring out the best in each other. It wasn't a quick thing. It wasn't like someone got a mark and suddenly they were a prodigy in a new area. Instead, it just meant that growth was possible. It took time, effort, and attention. On the other hand, if a mark was neglected, it could fade away. The deep earth had blasted my brain with all the marks, their relationship to each other, and their characteristics. It was just too much for me to handle, so it was already disappearing. Before it did, though, I quickly reached for the mark of the deep earth. What did it do? The deep earth covered so much it was hard to grasp. I tried to distill it down, but it was fading fast. There were basics, like heat, pressure, and raw materials. But to what end? Endurance. The earth endured. In the cold vastness of space, it was alive. It had survived much. Life had almost become extinct more than once, but the earth lived on. Transformation. Raw materials mixed and transformed. Atoms were crushed and realigned. Matter itself blended, grew, and created new forms. Life. With the help of creation, deep earth was about life. Life growing, life changing, life dying off, life being reborn again. Wow, that was almost too much. I took a deep breath and dove in again. This time I focused on the mark of the lagarel. They were the peak species in their realm, so their mark would help me feel comfortable in their home. To a lesser extent, it was the mark of trees. All types of trees. I would be able to feel trees, learn what they knew. I could help trees grow, or I could help them decay faster. For myself, I could heal better, become stronger, be more resilient. I wanted to ask the deep earth another question and realized my time was up. Sandy had formed a drop of pure lava and magic. My mark was ready. "Do you accept my mark?" the deep earth asked. Yes, I nodded. I accept and I thank you. I was getting nervous now. This was the part where I burned up. Jason Cole, member of House Louisville, witness to my ambassadors, source of Penny, source of Eggy, companion to a celestial guardian, friend of the lagarel, regarded by creation, regarded by the Allrune, and champion of the balance, has agreed to accept the mark of the deep earth. This pleases me. This pleases him. Sandy held up the drop. It was blazing with so much magic I shouldn't have been able to look at it. Instead, I stared at it in wonder. It felt so inviting. It felt like a warm fire on a cold winter day. It felt like the first day of spring. I should have been scared, but I wasn't. Instead, I felt excited, anticipation. Fear not, he shall be baptized by fire and become renewed. Sandy touched the drop to my chest, and I burst into flames. It was wonderful. I was wrapped in a warm blanket of fire. Like a drop of pure possibility entered my system. If I hadn't have been so comfortable with Penny and Eggy, it certainly would have occurred very differently. If I tried to resist it, it would have been very painful as it melted its way into my magic. Instead, I closed my eyes and welcomed it with open arms. This mark was tailor-made for me. It matched my 3 connections with Penny, Eggy, and Bermuda. It was gifted to me by my friend and head of household Sandy. There was nothing to fear. I sucked that small sun inside me and gave it a home in my magic next to the mark of the lagarel. I didn't put them too close in case they reacted negatively to each other, but they seemed fine. If anything, the tree seed seemed to enjoy the light and heat, treating it like a life-giving sun. Once the lava was in place, it started sending little capsules of orange magic throughout my system. I'd been worried about the mark of the lagarel contaminating my system with its leaf green magic. Now I saw that this was what it was supposed to do. The mark of the deep earth was way more powerful than lagarel. I couldn't have resisted its lava capsules if I'd tried. Instead, I just welcomed them, and they shut up shop in the space between my matrix. Soon my whole body was flooded with a light dusting of orange magic, and I felt fine. I waited for a bit, but nothing else happened. I'd have to see how to incorporate my new marks into my matrix, but that could wait until we got back to Louisville. For now, I had some leaf green magic, some lava orange magic, and all of my regular emerald green and sapphire blue magic. I opened my eyes and gave Bermuda a kiss. That's when I realized I was still holding him, and he was on fire too. My heart skipped a beat, but I stayed calm and took a second look. He was torching out, just like me, but he seemed totally unconcerned. Instead, he gave me a contented look and started purring lightly. I kissed him a second time. Thank goodness he was okay. Then I kissed him a third time for good measure. Sandy gestured, and all the stones started sinking back into the ground again. It happened much more sedately this time, like a slow elevator, so I could enjoy the experience. My fire died out before we reached the ground, and so did Sandy's. I felt the massive presence of the deep earth fade away as Sandy blinked and came back to herself. "Well, that was certainly interesting," she said. Then she passed out. At this point, I had enough excitement for the evening. I just wanted to get back to our suite. The trees were all gathered around Cecil, and it looked like they were holding him up. He was swaying a bit, and he looked exhausted. His hair branches hung limp, and his eyes were closed. Kopak hurried over. "I am so sorry, but we must end our fellowship," he said regretfully. "To say this night has been eventful would be an understatement. I trust you understand." I bowed deeply. "We must also rush back to our suite." I gestured at Sandy on the ground. "So we completely understand. Please give our congratulations to Cecil when he is recovered. Also, please convey how wonderful it was for us to meet you and the rest of the lagarel. We will treasure this night forever." "I will deliver your words and well wishes," Kopak said quickly. "May we meet again and drink pure waters together." He hair bowed and hurried off. I was so very grateful when NL and CL hurried over with my clothes. "Wonderful," I mumbled. Why was I mumbling? It felt like I didn't even have enough energy to talk. "Put my clothes on Sandy and then help us get into the house. Avoid the fair if you can." I tried to say more but ran out of energy. Suddenly it was all I could do to stay on my feet. Thank goodness the centaur llamas were there. NL put my pants and shirt on Sandy, while CL put my underwear, socks, and shoes on me. Then they grabbed the backpack, picked both of us up, and headed across the field back to the house. We didn't go in the main entrance, thank goodness. I'm sure we would have earned a few stares and started a rumor or two. Instead, we went in a secret side entrance for centaurs and took their corridors all the way back to the suite. When the door opened, I was completely shocked to see our living room packed with centaurs. This evening's events had been so big, and I was now so tired, I had completely forgotten that tonight was the healing night. There was MM and his grandmother, the captain and her husband, Goggles and his partner. They stared at me in confusion as CL carried me in, wearing only underwear and shoes. Their looks turned to alarm when NL entered carrying an unconscious Sandy. I was so incredibly tired. All I wanted to do was go to bed and sleep for a day. But I had a job to do, and everyone had put in a special effort to be here tonight. As long as my magic still worked reliably, I needed to pull it together and hand out some healing. "I know this looks unusual," I told everyone, "but don't be alarmed. We've just had a very interesting evening, and it has resulted in what you see here now. Tonight is still a go. Just give me a few minutes to get ready." I looked at NL. "Please put Sandy to bed and stay with her. I'm sure she's fine, but if not, let me know or get in touch with Amaya." I gave CL a tired pat. "Take me to the bedroom and help me get some clothes on." I was too weak to stand up, so CL just laid me on the bed, and I got dressed that way. It was awkward, but it worked. One thing I really needed to check was if my soul creations were good to go. "Tea?" I called. "Here," he replied instantly. "I've been waiting for you to call. You certainly do collect interesting experiences." "You can say that again," I said. "Are you and your grove doing okay? I was afraid the new lava magic in my system might have messed you up somehow." "Fortunately, we are all safe and doing well," he said happily. "I was originally afraid we were all going to get burned up, but it looks like we can touch the new magic and it doesn't do us any harm. I'm not sure how to use it, though. I tried absorbing a tiny piece, but that didn't work. I also tried adding it to a spore, but that didn't work either." "Don't worry about it for now," I told him. "I think it's something that will unlock over time. For now, though, I have several centaurs in the next room that need healing. Are you up for that?" Of course, he replied happily. There is nothing wrong with my grove. We are happy to go. We are happy to help and ready to go. Thank you so much, I said sincerely. You're the best. Now I needed to touch base with the battery side of my operation. Red, how are you feeling? I'm feeling great. Red sounded happy like he usually did. I know what's coming up and we are ready to go. You can count on us. Thank you, I said. Showtime in 5 minutes. CL had been waiting patiently while I checked my magic. When I opened my eyes, he helped me sit up. I felt like one of those tube-man or air dancers like you see at the car sales events. My arms felt like spaghetti and I was having trouble staying upright. Taking 2 marks in one evening had worn me out. I was hoping I could stand, I told him Riley, but that just isn't going to happen. I guess just carry me to the sitting room and prop me up on the sofa. Then I'm going to need coffee, lots of coffee. Of course, young master, CL said affectionately, and made it happen. The coffee helped a lot, although it was probably a bad idea to drink caffeine that late at night. Everyone wanted to know what had happened to put us in such a state. I tried to get on to healing, but everyone was still wound up at our entrance, and I realized we weren't going to be able to move past it until they heard something. So I let CL tell the story, and he did a great job. Hearing about us breaking through the hedges, rising out of the ground on stone, and bursting into flames, it sounded more exciting than I remembered. I guess I'd been too wrapped up in the moment to truly appreciate the adventure of it all. Fortunately, he didn't know any of the mental conversations, so he wasn't giving any secrets away. MM wished he could have been there to help. Goggles wondered if there was some way to bet on the hedges, and the captain wondered where House ATAC's security was during all this. Finally, I had enough coffee to get started, and everyone was ready to move on. I started with the captain and her husband. I gave each of them an ent and a gem cell and chatted with them for a while to make sure everything was going well. The captain initially refused healing. She said she was just there for her husband. But he said that was silly. He was only going to go through with it if both of them could be renewed and have a wonderful life together. Then he read her a poem he'd written for that night, telling her how much she meant to him and how proud he was of his wife. When he finished, she was tearing up and she agreed to go through the healing process too. I thought they were a lovely couple and a great pairing. She seemed responsible and organized, and he matched her by bringing creativity, fun, and a little chaos. Both of them had regular size cores, and both of them seemed fine, so I didn't think there was any need for either one of them to go through the shrine. Goggles and his partner were next. They seemed easy and comfortable together, and both of them were very happy to get renewed. I was curious what their life was like, but apparently being gay was accepted in Centaur Llama society. It was a bit unusual, but it was still very much accepted. By this time, the mushrooms were really hitting the captain and her husband, so I suggested they spend the night out in the memorial meadow. They would be safe, and they could lay down on the grass and look up at all the stars. Goggles and his partner hurried out through the scrim with them, and I could see them all getting settled together. I met MM's grandmother next, and she was a hoot. She was completely charming and a little bit naughty. She asked if all the young stads were going to come running after she got renewed, and I said I certainly hope so. MM just laughed and rolled his eyes. One thing I noticed right away was that her magic core was only slightly smaller than MM's, and it was showing signs of wear. I told him that as soon as she recovered from the healing, she needed to go to the shrine. I also asked him to stay and watch the group overall and make sure nobody wandered off. He assured me he was on it. My last productive thought was to ask my surfer dudes to bring the ents and gem cells back to me when they were done. Normally I would have just left him there, but for now I didn't want to lose any magic. Now it was done. CL picked me up and put me to bed. Bermuda was already curled up on my pillows waiting for me. I kissed him and we snuggled like we always did. Finally being in bed and able to relax felt wonderful. I gave a deep sigh, letting go of all the excitement of the day. Bermuda started purring and his contentment washed over me as I gently fell asleep. And so ends our next day at the gathering and our chapter for the deep earth. So this is the end if you're rewatching or whatever, but now we have a little show and tell. Harold? Oh, we are passed out. Wow. All right. All right. Come here, little Bubba. Say hi. Say hi. Hello, everybody. How are you? Okay. Oh, we are sleepy. Sleepy, 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 sleepy. Okay, let's go a little higher. Okay, so Friday. I'm usually not out of the office, especially over lunch. But for this particular day, I was out of the office. I was over lunch, and the road was closed coming back to work, and so I took a different route that I normally would never have taken. And I was turning down the street and I saw a big bird on the side of the road looking at something that looked like a hamburger in the middle of the road. And so I didn't want to run over the bird because the bird was looking like it wanted to run out and do some pecking. And so I was paying very close attention to the situation. It slowed down. And I realized that this was not a hamburger. This was a little tiny baby kitten. And so I went out and found it. And so there's something a little wrong with his eye. And so my whole day immediately changed. So we did an emergency go to the vet. Yes, we did. And we got some antibiotics, and we got a little cream, ooh, boo-boo, for our eye. And we have an appointment with an ophthalmologist. Believe it or not, we have a cat ophthalmologist. And to go see if we can do something about the eye. But the first vet we went to is not holding out a whole lot of hope. So I don't quite know what, oh, bless you, baby. I don't quite know what happened. But we are looking a lot better. Of course, we have food, water. We have a very exciting day yesterday. We actually had to travel a little bit down in Kentucky, and none of our brothers or sister are very happy about the new addition. So we are being extra careful and extra sweet and extra loving and making sure everybody has all kinds of love and all the things you need when you suddenly find out you're a new daddy or a new brother or, yeah. All over again. Yes, boo-boo. I know. So we've just been lovey, and so unfortunately I've gotten almost no writing done. Well, actually I've gotten no writing done over the last 2 days while we've been trying to make sure there's peace and hope and love and all that in our family. So this is Show and Tell, and we don't have a name yet because we are down an eye potentially. We were thinking of Nick Fury from the Avengers. We were found on Bank Street, so we're thinking most of our cats have 2 names, so we're thinking Banks for the second name, because also in Mary Poppins, one of my favorite movies, we have Michael and, what was the other girl's name? Jane, that's it. Michael and Jane Banks, and I love Mary Poppins. So we're thinking about something like that. So we're thinking maybe like Isaac, or Isaiah, or possibly no relation to anything, just Benjamin. We haven't had a Benjamin or a Ben or a Benny or anything like that yet. So anyway, we are investigating our options and names and all that. I will keep you guys posted. Sorry this has gone so long, and I hope you guys are having a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend, and I will see you next week. Bye now.